Hello, I'm Renata with Renata's Garden, and welcome to another episode of Unearth Horticulture. Today I'm taking the episode outside, and we're going to take a look at tree health, tree care, especially during this hot and dry time of year. We've been experiencing over 100-degree temperatures for several weeks now. We haven't had a lot of rain, and that takes a toll on all your plants, not just your annuals, but also your trees, which are often your most valuable asset in your landscape on your property. So it's really important that you focus in on getting those trees through this time of year. And we're going to talk a little bit about what those heat stress symptoms look like in trees and what you as a homeowner can do to help your trees make it through this difficult time of the season. I am standing here in front of my crabapple tree. Crabapples are excellent plants because they have beautiful spring color, and then they have persistent berries that help attract wildlife in your little yard ecosystem later in the summer. This one I've actually missed in my watering cycle this summer. It's on the north side of my house, and I tend to forget about the north side, I will admit. There are two main symptoms I am seeing on this crabapple tree that are telling me that it is in heat and drought stress major time. The first symptom is pretty blatantly obvious, and that is the branch tip dieback. You can see one here that's pretty clear. They're just turning brown and crispy and not looking good. That's also known as crown dieback horticulturally. And this occurs when a plant physiologically cannot keep up with the water that is being lost from the leaves. So that process is known as transpiration. And the reason the tips die back first in a tree is because it's the last place where water is translocated from the roots. So water comes up through the xylem and is transported all over the tree canopy. And obviously the last place, the end of the line, is the branch tips. And so that is where you're going to see heat and drought stress because the water is not getting efficiently moved there, or maybe there's no water to be moved there. So that's the first symptom that we're looking at. The second symptom is called epicormic growth, and this can happen periodically even without heat or drought stress, but it's a really common occurrence with heat and drought stress. So some plant species are more inclined to epicormic growth than others, and specifically fruit trees. So this crabapple tree, I have an apricot tree on the south side of the house. Both of those have a little bit higher tendency toward epicormic growth, and that's because of their genetics, but also because fruit trees, they tend to be pruned more frequently. And whenever you're pruning, you're creating more wounds, and that's going to stress the plant out a little bit more. Epicormic growth is triggered within a plant by a stress hormone, and there are always these little latent buds. And what I mean by latent is they're just kind of sitting there waiting to be triggered, waiting to be turned on. And when drought and heat stress out the tree, that hormone is there to turn on those latent buds and trigger that epicormic growth to shoot out. And there is, I'd say I have a trained eye to see what epicormic growth looks like. A lot of industry professionals just know what it looks like. There are two main types. There are suckers, which all of you have experience with. You'll be able to recognize, and I'll show you here. They arise from the base of the trunk. Those are a type of epicormic growth, a stress response that the tree is giving off. And then there are water shoots, and those occur up in the canopy of the tree from the branches, and you'll notice they're a little bit of a almost sickly color. They're very different from the normal bark color of the rest of the tree. So their bark color is a way you can tell the difference, but also water shoots, they really shoot up. They tend to have quite vertical growth, and they won't look like a branch because they're not a branch. So this time of year, I like to go through and prune off those water sprouts and suckers. Do not prune other parts of the tree because this is not a good time to take off parts of the plant that are helping to support the rest of the plant. wait to prune, but definitely you can take off that epicormic growth and keep the plant from using its energy and water to grow parts of the plant that you don't want there. So I'm gonna give those a quick trim. I've got a pruners here that are sharpened and they are sanitized, so I'm not gonna have any disease issues, or I'm gonna try to prevent those at least. And I'm just gonna give these a quick trim. I will mention that another time epicormic growth can occur is when you remove a branch, especially if it's a large branch. That can cause a stress reaction where it throws epicormic shoots off. And you can see on this crabapple that I had removed a branch here, actually a couple branches, probably too many at once, and it shot off some epicormic growth here. So I'm also going to give those a trim. We are now going to turn our attention to evergreens, and you can see this horror monstrosity of a fir behind me. This is a dwarf fir. You can see it's been topped at some point in its life, meaning that the top terminal growth was trimmed, so it's got a nice little cleft chin there. It's on the north side with my crabapple, so I have been forgetting to water over here. And you can see the toll it's been taking on this tree. Evergreens, they're not like deciduous trees. Deciduous meaning trees that drop their leaves in the fall and reflush out in the spring. These plants don't drop their leaves. They don't go dormant. Their needles stay on year round, and they stay at least somewhat green and alive. So when their needles turn brown and drop off, that means they're not coming back. So it's really important to keep your evergreens well hydrated during this drought and heat so that you don't end up with whole bald spots and swatches on your evergreen that don't come back. It looks really unsightly, and often people are forced to remove trees when they have bald patches or remove whole parts of the plant. Now you can just see when I drag my hand over this, the needles are just falling off because they're dead. They're no longer attached to the plant. But what the good news is that I can see there's some green growth deeper down, yet there's about 3 to 4 inches of green growth in there. So if I give this plant a light shearing to get some of this brown off the outside, and I give it a good soak, it's actually gonna be raining. We're expecting 2 to 4 inches over the next several days. It should be okay. It should make it through and it'll be fine. It's just something you wanna avoid altogether, and this is cutting it close. So definitely keep your eye on your evergreens. They're not often native to Kansas unless they're eastern red cedars. They're not native to Kansas, so they're not adept to dealing with our climate. So honestly, I'm native to Kansas and I don't feel like I'm adept to this climate. So definitely keep your eye on your evergreens and give them a good soak, especially if we get back into the hundreds yet here in the next month. Make sure that you keep your evergreens watered well. We are at the next drought and heat stricken tree on my property, and it is the river birch. And river birches are really popular in residential areas because they have a really unique growth habit. They're very weeping. They come in clump forms oftentimes, which means that they've got multiple trunks coming up from the same point. And they've got a nice papery bark, which adds winter interest for this tree in landscapes. However, what I will say about river birches is that they're not really well adept to our Kansas soils. They are not native, and they don't do well with our high pH. They have issues with iron deficiency. Iron gets tied up in our high pH soils. So what I did with this tree actually this year is I had it injected with iron chelate, which is the form of iron that plants can take up and use to help, with the deficiency I've been seeing in this tree. Now, iron deficiency often looks like really chlorotic leaves, which means yellow, very neon yellow, and eventual leaf drop. And you can see these branches look like it should be late fall, but in actuality, it is the end of July and my tree has just been losing leaves. The heat has just really aggravated this iron deficiency issue, and I'm not sure this tree is going to make it past another 1 to 3 years. What I suggest is making sure you keep your birches and other species that struggle with iron deficiency, like pin oaks. Pin oaks are really popular, especially in older parts of the Wichita area. If you have birches or pin oaks, just make sure you keep them well watered. And in the spring, I encourage you to consider iron injections, at least on trees that are 10 plus years old. That can help extend the life of your beloved tree. We are at the end of this heat tour, tree care tour. And this is my apricot tree. It's the last tree I wanted to show you because I wanted you to see a good example that I do have some trees thriving on the property. I've been keeping this one well watered with a perennial garden, and you can see I've even got some new growth coming on, which is really nice. No brown branch tip scorching, no leaf loss. I mean, I have some minimal leaf loss here. But the point is that water can do a lot for your plant. It can really support it during these hot, droughty times, especially if you have plants that are between 3 to 5 years old, or 5 years old or younger, I should say. They're not fully established yet. Make sure that you're giving those trees some good water. If you have any trees that are struggling with some sort of external stress like nutrient deficiency or pest issues, disease issues, you want to make sure that you're keeping those trees well watered because you want to minimize the number of stresses that plant is having to deal with. You know, it just makes good sense when you think about it. It's just important not to forget your trees right now. So I hope that you gleaned some good tips from this episode. If you have any questions, of course, reach out. I'm doing house calls now, so if you want me to come take a look at your trees, reach out and I'll be happy to make an arrangement with you. But otherwise, I think you should be set to go. Enjoy the refreshing weekend and the break from the heat. And until next time, you've been watching Unearth Horticulture.